Good morning, everyone. Am I on? I think I am. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the United States Department of State. My name is Kelly Curry. I am the Ambassador at Large for Global Women's Issues here at the Department. We're honored and delighted to have leaders from across the U.S. government here in attendance for the inaugural meeting of the Interagency Steering Committee of the White House's Women's Global Development and Prosperity Initiative. Thank you so much for coming. It's now my great pleasure to introduce our wonderful Secretary of State, Michael Pompeo, to open our discussion.
Thank you, Ambassador Curry. Welcome, everyone. I'm thrilled to announce that Ambassador Curry will be heading this new WGDP unit that we're establishing here at the State Department. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
It's a privilege and, frankly, joyous for me to be here today to kick off this inaugural Interagency Steering Committee meeting and to host every one of you here today. Thank you all for being here. Our country was founded on the self-evident idea and truth that every man and woman is endowed by their Creator with a certain set of unalienable rights and so deserves the chance to achieve his or her God-given potential. It's something we all, regardless of our political party, agree on. What's more, women's achievements are America's achievements, and President Trump's program is a historic and tangible expression of our founding values. Through this initiative, American interests are also served by having freer, more peaceful, and more prosperous neighbors, a goal at the heart of American foreign policy in this administration. The need for the WGDP is clear and it's urgent. Too many barriers have kept women from opportunities in far too many parts of the world. Tomorrow I'll leave for my trip to sub-Saharan Africa. I look forward to meeting with women across the region, women who I know Ivanka met last year when she was in Ethiopia. I'll meet a woman named Sarah. She's an Ethiopian weaver who worked with our USAID to expand her local business to 500 employees, a true testament to the effectiveness and the goodness that comes from the WGDP programs. If we succeed, there can be many stories like hers. Again, thank you all for being here, Ambassador Curry. I'm looking forward to working with you and our team and look forward to your leadership on this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And it's now my great pleasure to introduce my partner in crime, the real lodestar of this initiative, Ivanka Trump, Advisor to the President. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. And Secretary, I can say that Sarah will blow you away. What she's been able to do over the last decade to go from a small business and with some assistance to an employer of hundreds of women that she teaches the skills to, and now is the country's largest exporter of woven textiles. So really an amazing story. And really thank you just for being here and for supporting the dedicated men and women of the State Department and for your leadership in forging a legacy of bold diplomacy around the world. I look forward to continuing to partner with you as we achieve real impact. Today, I am honored that we come together to celebrate the one-year anniversary of the Women's Global Development and Prosperity Initiative, also known as WGDP. Anniversaries like this allow us an opportunity to highlight the incredible work that's been done by all of you and your team sitting around this table, and also set new goals to drive us into the future. We're especially excited to announce the State Department's new role as lead coordinating agency, working to support the White House's continued direction on policy. The State Department, as the Secretary noted, will establish a dedicated team to work on WGDP under the incredible leadership of Ambassador Kelly Curry. State's diplomatic and policy expertise is really incredibly critical to all elements of the WGDP initiative, but particularly as it relates to driving the types of legal and regulatory reforms that are so important to sustainable change across the world. So I want to thank you again, Secretary Pompeo, Ambassador Curry, and the many others across the State Department who share this priority and are committed to the success of WGDP. I would also like to thank USAID Administrator Mark Green for his incredible leadership on this initiative. Thank you, Mark, and thank you for joining us. You have been working with us since day one, and last year launched a dedicated WGDP fund. USAID's program management expertise is essential for this fund to be successful, and we know that it will be. In December, we were thrilled to announce that WGDP got its own line item in the 2020 Omnibus Bill, which is truly incredible for a young initiative and signals the strong bipartisan support we've been so fortunate to receive in the collaboration on this initiative with members across the aisle on the Hill since its inception. This past week, the President reaffirmed his commitment to this initiative in the 2021 budget, which doubles the allocation to WGDP. So many individuals in this room have worked tirelessly over the past several years to get this initiative off the ground, and I would like to thank everyone around this table for prioritizing women's economic empowerment efforts across your agencies and departments. WGDP success relies upon the hard work that you and your teams put forward every day, so thank you all. I also want to recognize and thank Senator Lindsey Graham and Senator Jeanne Shaheen for joining us here today. You have both been instrumental in the creation of this initiative from day one and have really worked with us on developing it based on your experiences and making it what it is. We first worked together on women, peace, and security legislation, and subsequent to that on the Women's Entrepreneurship and Economic Empowerment Act, and have built a very constructive relationship based on trust and a shared mission and a shared goal, which is why I am particularly pleased to be able to announce today that we will be introducing bipartisan legislation in the Senate to promote the empowerment, development, and prosperity of women globally, aptly named the WGDP Act. This legislation would permanently authorize WGDP and establish women's economic empowerment as a core facet of the United States foreign policy, in line with the President's own national security strategy. The Women's Global Development and Prosperity Act will also permanently elevate these efforts at the State Department by establishing for the first time ever in legislation an Office of Women's Empowerment led by an ambassador at large. Since the Bush administration, there have been continuous efforts to try to codify the role of women as a foreign policy priority. This White House looks forward to working closely with Congress in passing WGDP legislation and realizing this long overdue goal. We thank you for your partnership and your commitment to helping us get this done. I'd also like to recognize and thank Representative McCall. Thank you, Representative. And his counterpart in the House, Representative Lois Frankel. I'm really happy to also be able to announce that under their leadership, they will be introducing a companion bill in the House of Representatives in the coming days. And we thank you again for your steadfast commitment to advancing this work, Representative McCall. Really thank you, and thank you for being here. To put all of this in a little bit of context, last February, the President signed a national security presidential memorandum to officially launch WGDP. WGDP is the first ever all-of-government coordinated approach to women's economic empowerment across the agencies. This NSPM also established an ambitious goal of reaching 50 million women across the developing world by 2025. Today, we will release the first annual WGDP report in front of everyone today, detailing our impact. And I am beyond excited to be able to announce that we have reached over 12 million women in the last year alone. It's really amazing. All of this through innovative new programs and projects across all three of the WGDP pillars, all of which is itemized in the report. One of the key components of WGDP is recognizing the role of both the public and private sector in achieving large-scale and lasting results. The private sector is just an absolutely critical partner in our mission as we seek to address barriers to women's economic inclusion. And I would like to call out a few of our partners that were with us from inception, including MasterCard, Visa, and UPS, for helping us generate this tremendous impact. These partnerships have made it possible to source and scale innovative new projects across all three of the pillars. Under Pillar 1, we are advancing workforce development and vocational education for women by equipping them with the necessary skills to secure jobs in their local economies and to enhance the productivity of the work that they are doing. We have launched programs like Women Connect, a call for solutions to improve women's participation in everyday life by meaningfully changing the way women and girls access and use technology. Through this program, USAID has awarded over $2.9 million to 12 grantees working to bridge the digital gender divide in their countries. In Pillar 2, we are empowering women to succeed as entrepreneurs. We know that women-owned or women-run businesses make up a third of small to medium-sized enterprises in emerging markets. Yet some of the greatest obstacles to growth include insufficient access to capital, mentorships, and trading markets. Through initiatives launched by this administration, such as the WGDP 2X Challenge, we galvanized the rest of the G7 nations to join us in committing $3 billion to the world's women. And through the World Bank Women's Entrepreneur Finance Initiative, which the United States was a founding member of, otherwise known as WEFI, we have mobilized more than $2.6 billion to date from 14 separate countries. This weekend, I will travel with Ambassador Curry, World Bank President David Malpass, and IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva to the WEFI Summit in Dubai. With the help of many in this room, we are making historic progress on closing the gender credit gap and empowering women entrepreneurs to create jobs in their communities and growth in their economies. Finally, and very importantly, maybe the most importantly, Pillar 3 recognizes the central role of a legal framework that enables women to thrive by eliminating legal and societal barriers that prevent women from fully participating in the economy. Today, in 90 countries around the world, there are still laws on the books that restrict women's ability to work in the same jobs and sectors as men, oftentimes the predominant industries in those countries and communities. In 75 countries, there's at least one law that prohibits women from owning, managing, or inheriting property. We can and we must address these discriminatory laws and regulations. To that end, two of the most significant milestones we have seen in WGDP's first year are that the governments of Côte d'Ivoire and Morocco each amended laws to promote women's economic empowerment through addressing women's property and land rights. We commend those governments for making these important and bold reforms. The United States stands eager and ready to work with every country willing to take action to address discriminatory legal and regulatory barriers that hold women back and impede economic progress for all. In a landmark report that was also issued today, the White House Council of Economic Advisors, and thank you, Thomas, for being here, estimates that fully addressing the 5 legal barriers of WGDP, accessing institutions, building credit, owning and managing property, traveling freely, and removing employment restrictions could increase annual global GDP by $7.7 trillion, 8.3%. It's a really amazing report, and we suggest that everyone take a close look at it. In the coming year, we can work to empower millions of women to lift their families out of poverty, to grow the economies in their country, to reduce dependence, and to deliver on the promise of greater peace and prosperity. I look forward to working with each of you around this table as we advance this ambitious goal. And now I would like to turn it over to my dear friend, Senator Graham, to follow up with a few words. Thank you, Senator.
Well, thank you very much. I don't know where to start other than just say thank you to Ivanka and her team for not taking no for an answer. It's just so much easier to pass this bill than it is to meet with her all the time.
Lindsay, it's genetic.
And you have a determination that's good for Washington. To Secretary Pompeo, thank you for putting the full weight of the State Department behind this initiative. This idea needed a home, and I think it's found a good home here because you will nurture it and make it grow. To Jean, we live in tough, turbulent times. You're always somebody that is willing to work on things that matter. You have the ability to compartmentalize that's healthy for the country. I really do appreciate working with you. And what we're trying to accomplish here is to memorialize this in legislation. So this just not one administration's idea, it becomes the United States government's standing commitment to women. And that's where the bill matters. By making it a part of our law, it will be passed on from one administration to the other. And very quickly, I've been to Iraq and Afghanistan pushing 60 times. And what do you learn over and over again? That when a mother's voice is silenced, it's not a very good place to live. When a woman's future is determined on the day she's born and there's no hope, it's a very discouraging place. So to fix a problem, you have to identify it. We've got a lot of good programs. Feed the Future. President Obama is trying to make Africa more self-sufficient when it comes to food. PEPFAR by President Bush to get ahead of an AIDS epidemic that saved millions of young Africans from certain death. Power Africa to make sure that Africa can grow economically by having affordable power. But the one thing I can say above all else is that the way a nation presents economic opportunity to women will determine their future and ours. To those who wonder, why does this matter to you in South Carolina? I promise you, in places where women can be part of the economy, we have more customers. In places where a woman can have a say about her child's future, you'll have peace. In a place where they're treated poorly, put in soccer stadiums for sport, mass raped under the name of religion, our soldiers will soon go there because that ideology will eventually come here. This goes to the root cause of the problem. It could be 1120 in a lot of countries in this world, even though it's 2020. Imagine a world where your daughter cannot inherit property, that your wife or your sister can't go to the bank and borrow money, and education opportunity is closed simply because you're a woman. So what will we do? We will create a program to empower women and hold governments accountable who refuse to recognize the value of a woman's voice for their society and the benefit of mankind in general. Of all the things I've been part of, this could be the most consequential. And you have my commitment to make sure it's done this year, and long into the future, this program will be maintained, nurtured, and will grow over time. Thank you all.
Thank you, Senator Graham. Your commitment to this is inspiring, and I hope it inspires your fellow senators to get behind this initiative. And with that, I want to turn things over to Senator Shaheen, who has been such a rock star in leading this bipartisan effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and I'm pleased to be able to join all of you in this whole-of-government approach to addressing the challenges that women face globally. I appreciate, Ivanka, your leadership on this issue. And, you know, as noted in the 2014 report from the World Bank, on virtually every global measure, women are more economically excluded than men. Over 2.7 billion women around the world are legally restricted from having the same choice of jobs as men, and 104 countries have laws restricting the types of jobs that women can take, as well as where and when they can work. That number is a little different than the number that Ivanka used, but I think it's because it defines it a little differently. But regardless of whether it's 90-some countries or 104 countries, the point is too much of the world still discriminates against women. And the impact of economic inequality is not borne by women alone, as Lindsay said so eloquently. Communities and countries and the global economy are all hurt by the fact that women are not allowed equal opportunities. Research estimates that closing the gender gap in the workforce could add as much as $28 trillion to the global GDP by 2025. And if women achieve pay equality with men, this human capital wealth would increase by over $100 trillion, according to the World Bank. So I'm excited to be joining Senator Graham in this legislation. I think there is a lot of bipartisan support, as Lindsay said, for this kind of an initiative. And if we can get it off the ground and actually enshrine it in legislation, it will continue in future Congresses in a way that will make a huge difference around the world. To achieve global economic empowerment, we need a multi-pronged approach, which is what this legislation proposes, that incorporates women and girls' rights, education, protection, and empowerment in order to truly help women and girls succeed. And this legislation aims to do just that. WGDP, which this legislation codifies, takes a whole-of-government approach to gender equality, as all of the speakers have said to date. I'm particularly pleased that Ambassador Kelly Curry is here leading this effort. This legislation also makes permanent the dedicated office within the State Department to address women's empowerment and gender issues, and the direct line to the Secretary of State, which I think all of us would agree is really important in adding the credibility and really the weight to this effort. The legislation also creates more room for consultation with Congress, something that I know the House members and the senators appreciate. It ensures that executive and legislative branches are working together to address global women's issues. And as everyone has said, U.S. leadership on women's empowerment is absolutely critical. The U.S. must continue to be the standard bearer on gender policies, best practices, development programs that support over half of the world's population. So thank you all for the work that you're doing. I look forward to joining you and continuing this effort. Thank you.
Shaheen. Thank you, Senator Shaheen, again for your leadership. And now I'd like to recognize Representative McCall for some
thank you,
remarks.
Ambassador, and thank you, congratulate you on your new position. And Secretary, it's an honor to be here with all of you to celebrate the one-year anniversary of the Women's Global Development and Prosperity Initiative. Last year, I had the honor to travel with Senator Lindsey Graham and Ivanka Trump to Côte d'Ivoire to launch this important effort. And the energy and excitement around this initiative was incredible. And Ivanka, you are a rock star, and you're a rock star over there. And I'm so proud to support you in this critical work. You set a deadline, as Lindsay mentioned, and we met that deadline. I'm proud to say that. And in this partisan and very polarized time in our government, there are very few things we get to work on that earn such bipartisan support. And Senator Shaheen, thank you for your work on this as well. When I look at the esteemed guest here today, it's truly an interagency, bicameral, and bipartisan effort. That is because we know the impact that we are having here today. When a woman is empowered and an active participant in her community, the economy and society, we know that countries are more stable and more prosperous. That's why Lindsay and I passed the Global Fragility Act to stabilize these destabilized nations. To me, that gets to the root cause of the problem of extremism. When Secretary Pompeo talks about fighting instability and terrorism, when Mark Green talks about supporting a country's journey to self-reliance, when Larry Kudlow talks about opportunity for U.S. business investment. I think this effort to empower women is central to all these U.S. foreign policy objectives. This is a national security issue. The biggest threat, in my judgment, to extremism is an empowered woman. And that is why WGDP sets a goal to reach out to 50 million women. Think about that, 50 million women globally in developing countries by the year 2025. So I look forward to working with all of you to not only meet but surpass that goal. And I applaud my friends here today, particularly the Senators Graham and Shaheen, for today's introduction of the WGDP Act. Building on the success of WE Act last Congress, this legislation will codify the important interagency coordination and senior leadership dedicated to advancing this work. And most importantly, in the House, I'm currently working with my good friend Representative Frankel and Chairman Engel, and we will introduce the House companion to this legislation in the very next few days. And I will take everyone working together, this interagency, the NGOs that Mark works with, and advocacy organizations and private sector partners to get this done and on the President's desk. And I look forward to that great day where we'll be sitting in the Oval Office having this bill, important legislation, signed into law. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. We really appreciate the support from our separate and co-equal branch of government. Thank you very much. And on that note, I'd like to turn
You said co-equal, right?
I said separate and co-equal. We'd like to turn now to our WGDP Steering Committee co-chairs, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien and our National Economic Advisor Larry Kudlow to make some brief remarks. Thank you.
Larry, is that you or me?
You're starting and he's going after you.
Always.
First of all, it's great to be back at the State Department, and Secretary, thanks for having me back, and it's wonderful to see Ambassador Curry with this a colleague, and she's going to be fantastic in this new position. Ivanka, congratulations. You and the Secretary have taken an enormous step with this initiative, and your leadership is on a global stage is amazing. It's something I see reflections of as I speak with my colleagues around the world, and they're asking for presidential visits or presidential calls. I get just as many requests for Ivanka to come and visit the country. Don't tell that to the president, but your leadership is making an impact around the world, and it's recognized. So women's empowerment and development is a national security issue. It's a national security matter of the highest importance. And the reason for that is that societies and countries and nations where women fully participate in the civic affairs, the political affairs, and the economic affairs of their nation, those are countries with which the United States will have great relations. And that's why we've incorporated this initiative into the NSC process. This is a fully vetted NSC process that, as Ivanka pointed out, led to a national security memorandum from the President of the United States. And so you have the full support of the National Security Council. Of course, you know this. You have the full support of the President of the United States. And I'll just finish up and echo a comment that Senator Graham and Senator Shaheen and Representative McCall said. In a very polarized city and a polarized country, we need these initiatives that will bring Americans together. And this is one of those bipartisan initiatives where every American can get behind it. It's something for us to feel good about as a country, and it's an initiative that we can feel good about as Americans rolling out across the world. And that makes us safer, it makes us more secure, and it's going to make for a better world. So thank you, Ivanka. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your leadership on this initiative, and you have our full support.
Thank you, Secretary Pompeo. Thanks for hosting. Ivanka, great job. Lots more work to do, but we appreciate everything you've done. Thank you to the two senators for sponsoring bipartisan legislation, which can be a wonderful thing. It was the last time I was in this town. We're a little short now, but if you can boost that, it's a heck of a good thing. I agree with Lindsay. I want to say that success in leadership starts at home, and in the administration, we often talk about the blue-collar boom that's going on in labor markets, but there's also a women's boom going on in labor markets. And if you just bear with me for some numbers, women's unemployment rate is 3.6%. That's a 66-year low going back to 1953. 72% of the jobs created last year went to women. 59.1% of the jobs since the 2016 election went to women. In December 2019, the share of women working hit 55.7%, several percentage points ahead over the past couple of years. The labor force participation rate for prime-age working women hit 76.8%. That's up several percentage points in recent years. Women now account for over 50% of the workforce. So men are, once again, a minority group. Over the past 3 years, median weekly earnings for working-age women, defined as 16 years plus, median weekly earnings up 3.6% at an annual rate, compared to only 2.1% annually during the prior 3 years. These are impressive numbers. So there is a women's boom going on, as well as a blue-collar boom. Under Ivanka's leadership, of course, as everyone has said, we're helping to work towards full access to credit and traveling freely and legal rights to own property and start businesses and work in the same industries. And I've heard a lot of great GDP forecasts today. CA, I think, was $7 trillion and change. I prefer Senator Shaheen's number. It was $28 trillion. I believe in the optimistic law of big numbers. Let me say finally a couple of points. One is quite serious. Years and years ago at Princeton, I took a course from the great Middle East historian Bernard Lewis. Most people believe he was probably the best scholar of the Middle East, writing voluminously. Professor Lewis, in his classic book, What Went Wrong? The Clash Between Islam and Modernity. And he noted, and I have mentioned this to Ivanka, Professor Lewis noted in the key chapters of this book that, regrettably, the relegation of women to inferior positions in the economy of many Muslim nations, where women were not allowed to work, took what was once a great and mighty civilization and turned it into something that fell very, very low with this simple fact: 1/2 of the populations of those countries, 1/2, 50%, women were not allowed to work. It's an extraordinary point, and I raise it in a constructive way because, you know, you're going over and you're going to work on this, and that's part of the agenda, but it just shows you how significant. 1/2, 50% of the labor force missing in action in the economy, those were women who were denied the economic rights that Senator Shaheen referred to. Ivanka, you mentioned the need for, I think you talked about $3 billion from the G7. So I can announce, as the Sherpa for this year's G7 at Camp David in June, we are going to have a G7 plenary session on WGDP and related matters, and I will not let them out of the room until they fulfill your pledge. So basically, we won't let women work, give them all the economic rights they deserve. And I'll say this: any economy, any great country that affords equal economic rights as well as other rights is bound to produce more growth, more prosperity, and a happier nation and a more peaceful nation. Of course, I know that women are smarter than men. I learned it years ago. This just gives me a chance to work on that project. Thank you, Ivanka.
Thank you so much, Director Kudlow. And as you can see, I've got such wonderful partners at the White House. I don't know how we could possibly not succeed with this. With that, and that's a perfect segue to our next speaker, the Secretary of Labor. So thank you, Secretary Scalia, for joining us today.
Thank you, Ambassador Curry. It's a pleasure to be here today to celebrate the one-year anniversary of the Women's Global Development and Prosperity Initiative. I'd like to thank Advisor Trump for her leadership in the initiative. And when you talk about Ivanka and leadership, you actually mean that. You mean that it's a project that's going to be approached with determination, thoughtfulness, thoroughness, resolve, and results. I'd also like to thank Secretary Pompeo for hosting this event here today. As Larry mentioned, last year was a very good one for women in the United States economy. Just to touch on a couple of the points that he mentioned, unemployment for adult women reached a low last year that we had not seen since 1953. And according to the data that we have at the Department of Labor's Bureau of Labor Statistics, as you heard, since December, there are now more women than men in the U.S. labor force. You know, that said, just as we recognize that there's still more to be done in this country to ensure equal opportunity for women. So we know it's all the more urgent that elsewhere in the world that women have the kind of opportunities that I'm describing to you. At the Labor Department, we're very proud to be part of the WGDP effort. Our role in this initiative is, in a sense, an extension of things that we already do. This year, we're celebrating the 100th year anniversary of our Women's Bureau, which focuses on empowering women in this country through economic opportunities. And our Bureau of International Labor Affairs engages in efforts full-time to combat human trafficking, to save women around the globe from dangerous and devastating situations. I'm pleased to be joined today by the Deputy Undersecretary Martha Newton from ILAB. Martha, thank you for what you do. In the countries we focus on, women face discrimination. They face gender-based violence, poor working conditions, and limited employment opportunities. We're proud to contribute to this government-wide initiative to address that injustice. In 2019, the Department reached nearly 1 million women under the WGDP initiative and related efforts. I'll give you just one example. A woman in southeastern Zambia named Miriam, with assistance from a department-funded project called Empower. Miriam and other women in her community built a large poultry house that they were able to use to sell poultry to people throughout their community. They now plan to invest and diversify that business, selling tools and machineries, becoming what they call agro-dealers. This is the sort of entrepreneurialism that in this country I think we take for granted now, but that you can't take for granted elsewhere, and makes such a great difference in the lives of these women and in their community and ultimately in their country. We need more outcomes like this, and I'm pleased today to announce the award of 2 new technical assistance projects from the Labor Department, one of these in Mexico and one in Colombia. Both will increase women's and adolescent girls' marketable skills, reduce discrimination, and enhance work opportunities in agricultural supply chains. And I should add that this is in addition to provisions in the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. The President signed the legislation just last month, provisions in that agreement, which will promote equality of women in the workplace in Mexico and fight employment discrimination there as well. So again, Ivanka, thank you for your leadership, and Ambassador Curry, thank you for the role you're now going to be playing.
Thank you, Secretary Celia, for those new commitments. We really appreciate hearing about that. And at this point, I want to turn it over to one of our most important partners. We literally could not do this without USAID and the incredible work that they do around the world. And they are on the ground providing invaluable assistance. And as both the Secretary and Advisor Trump have noted, we just deeply, deeply appreciate Administrator Green and his personal commitment to this, as well as his agency-wide commitment. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It is an honor to join all of you here in marking WGDP's first anniversary and in celebrating the progress and results that we've already seen. So to be clear, women's economic empowerment has long been a part of USAID's work. What WGDP brings to the mission is new energy and a new comprehensive approach, an approach involving every part of the executive branch, from office to agency, from missions in the field to the Oval Office itself. It's bringing new resources, new analytic metrics, and a laser-sharp focus on the barriers that prevent women from having their place at the economic table. So USAID's role in WGDP is an operational one. It's a programmatic one. First, we manage the WGDP fund and ensure that we have optimal outcomes and results, and that we squeeze them from every single dollar that gets invested. Second, we work relentlessly to identify the most promising proposals for accelerating women's economic empowerment, provide initial funding to pilot those approaches, and then bring the best performers to scale. Finally, we work to leverage our extensive field presence to advance each of the 3 fundamental pillars that you heard Ivanka talk about. And the early returns are indeed promising. As you've heard, WGDP has already lifted the lives of 12 million women around the world. 9 million of those were direct beneficiaries of these programs I've been referring to. In its very first year, the WGDP Fund has made investments across 44 countries. And to amplify its reach, WGDP has collaborated with a large, diverse group of partners across the private sector, NGOs and local governments, in fact, 250 partners. At USAID alone, our programming has improved working conditions for more than 1.5 million women, and we have helped to provide entrepreneurial training for over 600,000 women. But the numbers don't really begin to tell the story of WGDP's emerging impact. Numbers cannot convey the story of women coffee farmers in Ethiopia who now have access to credit so they can start and expand their businesses, or women in Côte d'Ivoire's chocolate industry who are now able to take advantage of overseas market opportunities, or women strawberry farmers in Colombia who have now improved the quality and quantity of their produce to the point where they're actually supplying strawberries to major regional restaurant chains. And numbers don't begin to capture the joy I heard in the voices of these women as they proudly told Advisor Trump that because of WGDP, they are now able to chase their dreams. Or the pride Ivanka must have felt as WGDP's architect to realize that all of that hard work, and with due respect to those sitting on either side of me, all the time spent up in Capitol Hill, but to realize that that really has made a difference in very practical ways in the lives of people a long way from the Beltway. It's important to note that WGDP's outcomes are not USAID's, not by a long shot. WGDP works hard to tap into existing local networks. It's also forged partnerships with successful American companies that recognize that their business interests are best served when women are empowered around the world. Great companies like Pepsi, Mars, Visa, and others. So there's a lot to celebrate. And the stories that I've given you are just a small sampling of the work that's already underway under the first year of WGDP. They are a fraction of the ideas and proposals we've been receiving from partners and potential partners. Finally, there's one other aspect to USAID's role in this initiative, and that's working with the State Department to institutionalize this. There are lots of good ideas out there, and there have been throughout history, and they tend to last just about as long as an administration. I think our great mission, again, working so closely with all of you around the table, is to make sure that we lock this in, that we make sure that this framework is, in fact, a key component of American foreign policy. So as the second year gets underway, I am excited about what comes next. Innovative programs, empowered women, new economic energy, really and truly the best is yet to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate all of that. I think we have time to hear from a couple more people if we can keep it kind of tight here. And so now I'm going to turn it over to our acting vice chairman and our acting chairman and vice chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, Phillipson, to give us a little bit of information about the new report that Advisor Trump mentioned. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having CA participate in this important effort. We at CA are excited to be part of your work encouraging nations to allow women to participate fully in the economy. To mark the importance of this effort, the Council published a report this morning that finds that removing regulatory and legal barriers to women's economic participation generates huge economic benefits throughout the world. Put very simply, if a government restricts economic activity of half of its population, less of that economic activity will take place. In our new report, we formed a single WGDP index of women's economic freedom to measure how much a country allowed or disallowed women to participate in the economy. We then quantified the potential economic benefits if all countries changed their laws and regulations to allow women to participate in the economy in the same capacity as men, according to this index. By removing all restrictions on female economic activity, we find an increase in annual aggregate global GDP by about 7.7 trillion in real terms, more than 8% from its current level. Fully deregulating women's economic activity in the world's most restrictive regions would increase real per capita GDP by over 60% in those countries. The largest increases to GDP are predicted to come by removing legal restrictions to female labor force participation, as well as women owning and managing property. It shouldn't come as a surprise that leveling the playing field to allow women to participate fully in the economy would lead to increased economic performance. Just as the administration has realized that great results for Americans through domestic deregulatory reforms, so too can we encourage other nations to give women the freedom to choose their own paths, bringing forth benefits to each nation and the world. So thanks a lot for having us participate, and congratulations to Ivanka and the Secretary for leading this effort.
Thank you so much. And if I may just follow up on that for one moment, because we were talking about the discrepancy between the 28 trillion and the 7.7 trillion. What is unique and new about the WGDP index is it quantifies and breaks down specific to the 5 foundational laws that this initiative is looking at. So property rights, the laws that I'd mentioned, women's ability to participate in all industries. So it's specific to that as opposed to every potential law, and gives us some concrete and tangible levers that we can seek to use our diplomatic might and our power to convince to try and impact change and reform.
Yeah, I would just add to that, to reconcile Larry's optimism, is that 7 trillion is a short-run effect as opposed to a long-run effect, which will be much larger once you get GDP growth accumulating over time.
I'm for the Shaheen model.
Me too.
Thank you. And while I think we have to start somewhere, so I think a $7 trillion initial short-term goal is a pretty good one. And with that, I want to turn to Sean Cairncross from the Millennium Challenge Corporation, who has also, like USAID, been a tremendous partner on the ground. And I think that another one of these, while all of our partners here across the interagency have been tremendous in terms of moving these things forward. The work that MCC does on standard setting has been really tremendous, and so we really look to you to continue with your leadership. Thank you, Sean.
Well, thank you, Ambassador, and good morning, everyone. Mr. Secretary, Advisor Trump, and Ambassador, we appreciate you hosting the event. We're thrilled to be here today. WGDP is such a testament to the United States and the Trump administration's commitment to improving the lives of women around the world, and the Millennium Challenge Corporation couldn't be prouder to be part of that effort. WGDP is having a direct impact in our partner countries, and a recent example, as Ivanka mentioned, was Morocco, where, working with our partner government, we implemented and codified laws securing land rights for women across the country. In addition, MCC is formally adding women's economic empowerment to our investment criteria, which guides project development across all spectrums at MCC. And through this criteria and our investment model, we will continue to target and eliminate financial, institutional, and societal barriers on women's participation in the economy. So thank you, Ivanka, for your tireless leadership in spearheading this effort. And I'd like to say how much we look forward to working with Ambassador Curry and her team on delivering on our shared goal of improving lives for millions of women around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. And I wish that we had time to hear from all of our wonderful participants and wonderful partners today, but I'm mindful that we have a lot of senior principals in this room, and I'm mindful of senior principal time and wanting to get us done on the dot at 10. So with that, I'm going to make some brief closing remarks, but first start by thanking everyone for coming today and for the incredible commitments that your agencies have shown, that you've shown as leaders, and the work that we are doing together. It truly is is transformational. We are transforming the lives of women, we're transforming the lives of their communities, and we're transforming our relationships with these countries through the work that we're doing. And so it is something that we can all be very proud of, as Senator Graham said, and I think that the legacy that this administration is creating and with our bipartisan partners in Congress is truly something we should be deeply, deeply grateful for the opportunity to participate in. And to that note, I want to thank Advisor Trump for creating the idea that we're now implementing across the whole of government here. As someone who, I feel like it's the honor of a lifetime to be able to participate in this transformative project that we are embarking on year 2 of. And that's, as a human rights lawyer myself, and also as a mother, my beautiful 11-year-old daughter over there, Sarah, is here with us today, and as a working mom, and as a diplomat who gets to come to work every day and represent this amazing country. It is incredible that we get to work on a project that allows women around the world to enjoy the same rights and privileges that I get to wake up every day with, that we all take for granted in this country. And so that is really what we're doing, helping women to create a brighter future for themselves, their families, and their communities. To that end, we do have to be very thoughtful about our engagement, but we have to be bold in our advocacy. I think that the 5 areas of law that will be the underlying premises of Pillar 3 as we go forward in this new chapter are the keys. That's why the CEA has focused on them. That's why the World Bank has done the work to quantify and to determine that these are the areas where we can unlock the greatest potential. And I look forward to spending the next year really working on this and focusing on these legal barriers to women's economic participation. And then working on the next step, which is the informal barriers, because once you change the law, you have to change attitudes and change minds. And that's where the really hard work starts. So I look forward to working with our WGDP co-chairs and to all of our colleagues around the table and all of the agencies that have committed to this. It is a truly global undertaking and a truly whole of government undertaking that we're celebrating here today. Happy birthday, WGDP. This is an amazing day to celebrate that too. And I just want to thank you all so much for coming. Thank the Secretary for his tremendous leadership and the confidence that he's shown in me. I hope I can live up to the expectations that you've all laid out for me around this table. Thank you all for coming.